I just love it when I finish recording an hour-long video only to find that somehow the stop button on my audio recorder was pressed in my pocket and I lost half of it. And because audio is serious business, I just can't leave it be. I have to redo it. So here we go, talking about shields. I made a video about shields before, the pros and cons of using a shield compared to using a two-handed weapon or empty offhand or an offhand weapon in the other hand, things like that. This is specifically about Viking shields. And I'm going to make some comparisons to strap shields. Now, I made a video about the pros and cons of center grip versus strap shields back in 2014, but that's quite an old video, and here's an updated perspective on it. So this is going to be a little more comprehensive, although not an entire hour of rambling, don't you worry, I do edit that down. First, let me show you something awesome that today's sponsor sent us, North Bands. They've been making rings by hand in the US for almost 10 years, and there are all kinds of materials to choose from. Various hardwoods, antler, steel, tungsten, titanium, even meteorite. They come with a wooden ring box and a silicone band that you can wear instead whenever you're exercising or doing some work that would be rough on the ring otherwise. Before the ring is made, you get a sizer so you can figure out exactly what size you need. And the nice thing is that you can detach these individually and wear them for a while to really see what's long-term most comfortable. And I would definitely suggest giving it more space than you think you need, because whenever your finger swells up, it might be too tight. I really like this one here. The stripe in the center stands out a lot and glitters in different light, and depending on the angle that the light hits it at, it's different colors, and it contrasts very well with the black and the dark brown from the ironwood. We like these so much that we replaced our wedding bands with them. The contrast is just perfect. The sparkly flamboyance and the more down-to-earth, it just fits. So if you're looking for an engagement, a wedding ring, or just something cool and unique to wear, check out northbands.com. With the promo code SCAL, you can get 20% off. By the way, this would be kind of a weird outfit in history because it's a very fancy but slightly outdated helmet. It's from the Vendel period, and it's a later spear. And there's no armor to go with this very fancy, expensive helmet, and not even a sword, just spear and axe. So this is kind of weird, but hey, it's just to make the video a little bit more visually interesting. I still don't have a reproduction of a strapped shield for visual reference. I just have too many Viking shields. These are made by Von Morfett, by the way. I'll put the link in the description down below. Whenever I make a comparison, you have to keep in mind the variety of strapped shields that existed in history, not just different types, of which there were many, of course, but also the same type could be strapped in different ways. There are a lot of depictions showing the straps in different positions. Now, some of this could be artists not being as familiar with those shields, but it could also just indicate quite a variety in personal preference, basically, or differences between individual time periods. You know, the Middle Ages are quite a long stretch of time, really. So between the early and high Middle Ages, for example, there could be significant differences. Let's get to the pros first. I'm going to talk about the benefits first, and then I'll get to the cons. So the first one is maneuverability. This is quite flexible and agile. You can use this in a number of different ways. In fact, this has been debated a number of times. How the Vikings did it, we don't know exactly for sure, because we do not have those neat instructional manuscripts the way we do from the later Middle Ages and the Renaissance. So you know, it can be held flat forward like this. The way I like to do it is at an angle, so you have a good amount of coverage, but you can see pretty well. And so this way the shield is in front of you. You can actively use it for both offense and defense. And that is really one of the main benefits, because you have just one hand on the grip here. You can move it around, you can rotate it, you can do a deflectional defense against an opponent's strike. So I don't have to just brace myself and absorb it all. So cut down, boom, like this. I can allow it to move my shield over, at which point I have the opponent's weapon on the outside, the shield is in between, and now I can use my own weapon on the inside. It's also very obvious with a thrust. So if I receive a thrust on the shield, I can allow it to rotate, and now I've got the weapon covered here. Now you could use deflection with a strapped shield as well, if instead of just meeting it head on, you swipe it aside, things like that. That of course works, but you have the same option here, but you have additional options for deflectional parries. While at the same time, you can also brace it to an extent on your shoulder. Like I can hold it like this, and I can brace it with my shoulder and with my forearm to an extent. I'll get back to this point about strapped shields later. So you can use the shield very actively to knock it into the opponent's shield or the weapon. You can move it around a number of ways. If it gets onto the other side, you can now attack from the inside, things like that. And because you can put the shield at arm's length, you can also move it up and down quite a bit more. So if you want to, you can stretch out the arm like this and cover most of your leg. Of course, that leaves your upper body exposed, but you have the option. With some strapped shields, depending on how the straps are attached, you get quite a bit of reach as well. But of course, because your arm is generally closer to the edge of the shield, you can't reach as far as you can with this. Here your reach is half the diameter of the shield, or the radius. Being able to stretch out your arm and move the shield quite a bit further away from you also means you're safer from projectiles generally. You might have seen the video on Todd's workshop where he tested arrows against a medieval shield, and some of them went quite far. So if you think about having this attached to your arm and closer to your body, this would go through. If the arrow goes through the shield and penetrates just a little bit and nails you in the arm and then pins the shield to your arm, once the arrow is in the shield, this gets stuck really bad. You can't just easily push it through or pull it out. They tend to lodge themselves quite firmly in a shield. So at that point, the only option would be to pry your arm off the shield basically and rip out the arrowhead that way. Now, of course, you can make any shield more arrow-proof by adding additional layers. But of course, that additional thickness comes at the cost of additional weight. So you can't move it quite as fast as a lighter shield, and it's going to be more exhausting to hold over longer periods of time. Another pro is that if you need to, in an emergency, you can let go of the shield. Let's say if the shield gets stuck on something, maybe worst case scenario on a horse that gallops away and threatens to drag you around, then with a strapped shield, it's not as easy to let go of it. Whereas here, all you need to do is open your hand basically, and you're rid of it if you need to. That also means that if somebody tries to wrench the shield out of your hand, it's a little bit easier because you really only have your grip strength and wrist strength to work against that. Now with a strapped shield, again, there's pros and cons on this particular issue because on the one hand, it's going to be a little easier to hold against it because you can brace it against your body. You can use your entire arm and shoulder basically to resist. At the same time, if anyone does manage to wrench your shield, you're in even greater trouble because now it's fixed to you and they can basically put you into a joint lock. Next up, Viking shields are light, or can be at least. Again, it depends on the individual shield and its thickness. Based on the archaeological evidence, Viking shields tend to be between 5 and 12 millimeters thick, and sometimes they're chamfered, meaning that the edges are thinner than the center. For example, here's a shield from Denmark, which is 8 millimeters thick in the center and then 5 millimeters toward the edges. So they shave them down to overall make them lighter and get more favorable balance. So that way most of the mass is in the center, and then you can maneuver the edges a little bit more easily. This is also chamfered. The shield right here weighs 4.3 kilograms or about 9.5 pounds. The one that I made is not chamfered, but it's smaller and it weighs 3 kilograms or 6.6 pounds. If you compare that to a particularly large shield like the Roman scutum, it's a little bit difficult to find specific numbers, but it seems that they can be between 5 and just under 10 kilograms, so roughly between 10 and 20 pounds. A lot of other shield types as well with equivalent size also tend to be a little heavier. Again, it depends on the individual ones. As far as offensive use is concerned, I used to think that you can strike more effectively with a center grip shield because you can basically punch with the rim of the shield. You can extend your arm all the way. But again, depending on how the straps are attached, you might be able to use a kite or heater shield, for example, quite effectively. You might even be able to thrust with a point. So I'm not sure you can really make that argument one way or the other in general about center grip versus strap shields. All right, so on to the downsides. The first con is that a round shield like this is arguably not optimal for the human shape. I mean, the way I'm currently shaped, I guess it's a little bit more appropriate. Shut your mouth. But in general, since we are longer than we're wide, it makes sense to also use a shield that is longer than it's wide. Because if you want any kind of coverage for the legs, essentially the only option is to increase the diameter of the shield, at which point you get a lot of extra bulk that can make it awkward. You get a lot of extra weight. A kite shield covers the legs quite a bit more effectively. And you can see that in the case of the Normans who fought on horseback. It is useful to have that extra coverage because on horseback, your legs are going to be a lot higher than they normally are. And if you are fighting infantry, then they're quite a bit more exposed. And speaking of horses, even though center grip shields were used on horseback for a long time, you can definitely see some benefits in using a strapped shield when you're riding a horse. If I'm going to use this strap here that's for carrying the shield, if I'm going to use that and pretend I've got it strapped to my arm, now my hand is actually free, so I could hold the reins of the horse, and generally you're able to more effectively hold on to something else. If your hand is in a strap, you can still open your fingers and close them around something. Now you can do that with a center grip as well, to an extent. Now, for example, if I want to hold my axe here in the offhand, and there's apparently some mention of that in the Old Norse sagas, where someone is holding an axe behind the shield where it's hidden but easily accessible. So you can still do that, but there are certain limits. And for one, that compromises the grip you have on the shield, because the more you have in your hand, the more it spreads your fingers apart, the less strongly you can really hold on to it. The issue is also it's not really available the same way it can be with a strap shield. The hand is closer to the edge of it, so you can actually hold something that then protrudes quite a bit further beyond it. Like for example on a Scottish targe, you can use it quite well with a dagger. The next drawback is that you can't brace it as well as you can a strap shield. Now I can definitely rest the shield against my shoulder here and brace it like this. In fact, if I'm wearing a helmet as well, I could even hold it this way and brace it with my helmet as well. So now it's resting against my shoulder, my upper and lower arm, and my helmet. But I'm only supporting half the shield, basically. Whereas with a strap shield, since the arm goes across most of the surface of the shield, you're bracing more of it. So that just allows you to resist a little better if you do have to take the full brunt of a blow, which isn't always ideal, but if you have to, you can brace more effectively with that, especially also considering that even though it can be an advantage to let them push your shield aside and deflect some of the force, if you don't want that, there isn't really much you can do about it. A shield that is attached to the arm can't be moved as easily. For example, if somebody were to use an axe or you hook into the edge of the shield and then pull it, there's very little I can do to stop that because the leverage is working against it and it's just going to move. The next drawback is that they're not as strong and durable as some other shields. They were made of wooden planks glued together. You can see the lines of the planks here, and there's no archaeological evidence of multiple layers on Viking shields. Whereas if you look at the Roman scutum, for example, it's made of plywood or laminated wood, meaning that you have several layers with the grain crisscrossing. On this shield here with the planks, the grain goes in the same direction as the planks, meaning that if a sword, for example, cuts in here, along with the grain, it's much easier to split it and do a lot more damage to it. Whereas a cut perpendicular to the grain doesn't do as much. Since the scutum was made with multiple layers of wood, with the grain going perpendicular, that's a lot stronger in all kinds of directions. The sagas quite often mention shields being destroyed or badly damaged, and for the home gun, which is a judicial one-on-one duel, it was common to bring multiple shields, 3 if I remember correctly. Now, the good thing about that is if the opponent cuts into your shield and gets his weapon stuck in your shield, fantastic. Now you can manipulate the opponent's weapon and you wrench it around, move it, control it, and you can't attack you anymore with that weapon. So I think this is by design. They weren't supposed to be indestructible, but of course on the battlefield that can leave you with your pants down, so to speak, if your shield gets destroyed or damaged to the point where it doesn't protect you much anymore. So again, just like with the pros, I might have missed or forgotten something. Feel free to chime in and let us know what else you think, what other pros and cons there are to Viking shields. Hope you found this interesting, and thanks for watching. Now get out of here.